Welcome to the Safer Community Scotland podcast. Our podcast features conversations with experts from across the community safety sector in Scotland and beyond. In this episode, we speak with Gilly Mendes Ferreira, Head of Innovation and Strategic Relations at the Scottish Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, or SSPCA. We spoke with Gilly about the latest SSPCA-led Firework safety campaign in the run-up to Bonfire Night on the 5th of November. Welcome to the Safer Community Scotland podcast, and today we're speaking with Gilly Mendes Ferreira, who is Head of Innovation and Strategic Relations at SSPCA. So Gilly, welcome.
Thank you very much.
So first of all, just to get the ball rolling, could you just tell us a wee bit about your role and your background?
Yep, so I've been with Scottish SPCA now for coming up 17 years. I am originally a zoologist by training, and then joined the society in the education team. Have spent a lot of time over the years developing our educational programme, Animal Wise, which covers all ages, also working in more challenging situations where you work with young people who've maybe harmed animals as well, and developed a specific programme, Animal Guardians, for that. And more recently, in the last few years, I've spent more time on the sort of political side, so looking at our policies. And my remit now is very much the innovation part. So what are the sort of key animal welfare issues that we're facing in Scotland? What partnerships could we form? What services we maybe want to provide to help tackle that issue? And then strategic relations is very much, that partnership work. And that includes also on the political front, so MSPs, legislative changes, making sure that animal welfare legislation meets modern day issues that we currently see. So that's certainly a big part of my role as well.
Okay, and obviously the Scottish Community Safety Network is part of a multi-agency campaign with you and numerous other partners around fireworks for the third year now running. Do you want to just tell us a wee bit quickly about the campaign?
Yeah, so the purpose of the Firework Safety campaign was basically to encourage particularly young people to be safe, be kind and be smart around fireworks. Taking the multi-agency approach is always a preferred option for us, because at the end of the day, you want that messaging to be quite clear, regardless of which organisation is presenting that messaging. And that's specifically very important for young people. So yes, it's been a fantastic partnership with so many different organisations, including yourselves. We launched a schools competition this year. We've just done the judging actually this week, and the announcement's going to come out next week. And that was asking young people to create like a poster or a video to really kind of help educate their peers on how to be safe around fireworks. We know that a lot of accidental injuries when it comes to fireworks is often young people not having that knowledge, or just getting caught up in the excitement and not really thinking through their actions, or maybe those around them as well. And that includes animals in that space as well, obviously, which is where our role comes in. Many people have pets, and it's really important that not everyone enjoys fireworks. There's lots of people who do, but there are people who don't enjoy it, and they also see that the animals get quite distressed. So we want to make sure we're there to support that, whether it's somebody phoning our animal helpline, whether it's going out and actually dealing with an incident. That's what we feel our role is, and working with the other agencies as well.
Nice. So obviously the law around fireworks sales is changing this year, and some of the law changes have already come into force. So we've got things like changes to the sort of times that fireworks can be sold. We've got control zones coming in, so councils will be able to set particular areas of the city where, or local authority area where fireworks aren't allowed to be set off. And also there's things like the sale of fireworks to children under the age of 18 is being banned as well, and also procuring fireworks for children under 18 too. So quite a few changes this year coming in the lead up to or on Bonfire Night itself. So what do you think will be the likely impacts that? Do you think that the impacts are going to be quite positive broadly?
Yeah, I mean, always, and I think I said this throughout being part of the Fireworks Review Group as well, that it comes down to enforcement and making sure there's adequate resource there to enforce this. It also comes down to public education. Do the public are they fully aware of these changes? How is that being communicated out to them? And so I think if those two things work effectively, then I think it will make a big difference. The biggest challenge for anyone who owns animals, whether that's pet animals, but also livestock and so on, is the unpredictability of fireworks. So often, if farmers know, for example, there's usually a big firework display down the road, and it always happens at that same time of year, they get the heads up, etc. They can plan for that. They can move animals away into a different field, move them indoors or what have you. But when they don't have that notification, that's where the problems occur. And it's the same with people who own pets. If they know that there's normally something that goes off in the local park, they can plan for that. They can walk their dog earlier on in the day. They can make sure that they're being sort of quite stringent with what doors are open and closed when fireworks going off, put music on to distract, all those different things that we advise, and it helps them plan. So I think that restriction of when fireworks can go off, the days and times and so on, should hopefully have an impact. We are looking forward to when the firework control zones come in. That I know is not obviously for this year, that will be coming in due course. That will be very important to us, particularly like our centre in Glasgow at Cordonald. At the moment, that's quite a challenging environment for us to manage when there's fireworks going off. It's in a built up area. We end up with disused firework cartridges in car parks and so on. The dogs are very distressed, despite us doing all the things like putting music on, trying to cover the windows, putting extra blankets and so on in their kennels. You come in the next morning and they've defecated everywhere, they've destroyed things, and clearly have been visibly very upset by the fireworks. So us having that ability to apply for that area to be a firework control zone, as an example, would have huge benefits for the animals in our care. I know there's been lots of talk about, well, you should just train the animals to not to basically get used to noise, but obviously as an organisation, the turnover of animals for us is quite high. We get them in, we rehabilitate, we rehome. So some of those animals may have only actually just arrived the week before or the days before. They are already needing rehabilitation with lots of different things, and this is just something that adds on to that pressure. So I think for us, that will be a key thing that will make a difference to us, certainly.
So I'd asked you for our newsletter this month to give us a poll question, which you gave me, and had sort of asked about sort of animals and people and how they react to fireworks, and kind of about maybe whether people could put in the comments which type of animal that they had. So I was just interested to know, it's not something I'm aware of, it might not be something other people are aware of, just when you're mentioning that people are suggesting you could just train the animals more. I guess maybe most of us kind of have an understanding that dogs would react negatively or not enjoy the loud noises of fireworks, and possibly cats as well. But I presume it's not just dogs and cats we're talking about, that other animals also experience distress around bonfire night.
Definitely. Animals such as like your rabbits, your guinea pigs, really acute hearing again, having that noise. If you're in a hutch in a garden, there's no sort of security around you. Yes, you might have extra bedding in your hutch, for example. That is very distressing for them. And we do always ask, again, if fireworks coming up, can you bring them indoors somewhere, if it's in the utility room or whatever it is, so that they feel that a bit further away from that noise. Horses are another big thing. You can't bring a horse into your house to do things. So what do? You obviously try and stable them, making sure they can't injure themselves if they are getting spooked by the fireworks and their legs are flying around. There's obviously a huge injury risk there, whether it's banging off the walls and so on. Again, I know that many people put like the radio on and so on. Some will maybe even just put cameras up and just try and watch and just see, do they need to go back down and check on their animals. But I think that's the larger the animal, the more the challenge that you're going to have. So yes, it's certainly not just your dogs and your cats. Yes, dogs, we always attribute them to being really good at training. trying to train a cat. Cats, if anybody owns a cat, slightly more it's on their terms, I would say, as to what they do and how they do it. So yes, I think it's just being mindful of that and trying to make sure we do encourage anyone who does own a pet to go to their vets, well in advance. We know it's really good to hopefully try and quantify this sometime, but we know that there's an increase in purchases of calming medicines, whether that's through your pet stores or whether that's through your veterinary practice, leading up to the bonfire nights as people try and again intervene. And we'd always say, if your animal's showing behaviours that are worrying you, contact your vet. There's maybe something else that they can do to support.
Yeah, it was interesting you were saying that the bigger the animal is, the more difficult it can be to train. But I was even thinking that presumably the smaller the animal is, that like rabbits, birds are not going to be so easily trained to.
No.
Are probably just going to experience the distress. Obviously, I think it was earlier this year, although time is flying so fast, it might even have been late last year. I'm sure it was early this year that I think it was yourself, our chief officer, Lorraine, and others gave evidence to the Fireworks, to the Scottish Parliament.
Yes.
Around the Fireworks law changes. What, aside from just animals, what came out of that also, which some people I'm sure will be aware of, some maybe less so, is that it's not just animals that experience distress around fireworks, but there are people who perhaps either have certain health issues, and in particular maybe certain mental health issues, post-traumatic stress disorder, for whom fireworks can be particularly distressing. So presumably we think that the changes to the law are going to be quite helpful for them as well.
Yeah, I think if you've got maybe, say, a person who's suffering from autism, for example, who need to have that kind of understand what the plans are for the day, that predictability, that kind of sort of scheduling and so on, and then a firework goes off and they're very hypersensitive anyway, that can cause significant stress not only on the individual but those around who are trying to support them. So, and it's the same as I say, with your post-traumatic stress disorders, that's going to trigger when you hear these bangs and so on, because you're already quite sensitive to your environment around you. So I'm hopeful that these changes, again, human animal, it allows the people around in that space to plan and to mitigate as much as possible. Maybe, I think we heard in that evidence session, that sometimes people actually book a holiday away from that at that time of year because they know it's going to cause a lot of distress for the person that they are responsible for caring for. So they just remove themselves from that situation. So again, that I think having that ability and knowing that you can do that, and that's the only time that you have to do that, surely is a huge benefit. It's if you go and do that and you come back, oh, wait a minute, they're still going off and they're not meant to be going off. And that's where it comes back to that enforcement. You need the resource out there to do this properly and to make the legislation work.
Yeah, and a big point for sure, the kind of resource to it. I mean, I think it was the other night I was walking home in Glasgow and there were some fireworks going off in the kind of not quite city centre, but it was nearby where I stay, which is not far from the city centre. It certainly, in terms of antisocial behaviour, has been a big issue as well for us, and our partners who perhaps deal more with that. Just with some parts of, even in our cities, can be or city centre, sometimes even can be quite distressing, not even for those who have issues like autism or post-traumatic stress, but just it can feel like quite dangerous to be walking around at nights where fireworks are sometimes being thrown around or lit off even just. But I mean, I have seen them being thrown at cars and things like that as well. So it can be quite
it's intimidating, isn't it, to see that. And then you maybe do see some enforcement there, so you're like, well, they're already there, so it's no point me phoning because they're already there. But that situation can escalate quite quickly, and I think that's the hardest thing fortunately, the sort of cases where fireworks have been deliberately targeted at animals are few and far between, I would say. We've not had a sort of major case recently. We've had very historically where we had a hamster that was attached to a firework and set off and filmed. We've had fireworks strapped with duct tape to cats. But again, thankfully, that are historical examples. We've not seen that the last couple of years, which is reassuring, although not that we know of. Anyway, it's certainly not come to us. So again, it's such a shame because that is a minority of people who actually can have quite a detrimental impact to the communities that they're in. And it's one, you've got the education piece, you've got the sort of resourcing and enforcement side of things as well. And it's changing that behaviour, asking for a behaviour change on how we view and use fireworks in our society. You have to recognise, obviously, there's different religious activities that go on throughout the year, that's a key part of their celebrations. I know there's been a lot of mention about silent fireworks, which are maybe used in other countries. Can they be used here? And that certainly needs more exploration as well, as an option. It's interesting, we did do a survey with young people last year about what they thought about fireworks and experiences, and the biggest challenge that they found was the noise. They liked the lights, you know, and the kind of atmosphere. It's the noise that was the bit that they didn't like. So
yeah, no, that's quite interesting, and I wouldn't want to sort of be stigmatizing younger people, because some of our antisocial behavior research in the past has shown that antisocial behavior is not necessarily the preserve of the young, which seems to be the more
generational.
Yeah, it seems to be the sort of more when the public think of ASB, they tend to think that we're talking about young people, which the stats don't necessarily back that up. But certainly I was aware as a younger person, which is increasingly disappearing into the distance when that was.
Likewise.
Which I struggle to recognise quite yet. But I mean, I do remember it was something that seemed to be an issue even at schools that I was at, where fireworks were being let off in playgrounds, were being let off after school, particularly on the bus route. I do remember running for a bus, the school bus, in fact, and it felt like you were kind of dodging through a war zone as fireworks were exploding round about you. And then there was a kind of peer pressure element where some pals in a group of friends would maybe want to go out and let fireworks off in public places, and maybe other friends weren't so keen on it, and sort of people getting dragged in. So it's good that obviously the awareness raising campaign and poster that you're doing with the schools definitely has an important role to play in that.
And I think it's hard to, like, for young people now, I say it's that peer pressure, but that's not even actually the young people across society with the sort of social media, the influencers. It's a different world, like different world to what I grew up in, and it's rapidly changing as well. I've got young kids, and you know, their engagement with the digital world is so much different, and the questions are very different to what I would have thought of asking if I was 10, for example. So I think there's a lot of videoing what you do, you know, giving your opinion, showing, and I think that also drives a lot of the actions that we see that happen in society now. And unfortunately, the fireworks side as well, there's that kind of, I want to create a reaction, this is really funny, you know, I want to impress. So let's do this. Maybe not thinking about the consequences afterwards, because it's that impulse. I've got my phone, I can record things, I can post things, it's there out in the world in seconds. And I think with all the things that you look at sort of trying to sort of manage in society, and whether it's antisocial behaviour or whatever it is, that's the other element now, on top of what was always has been an issue in the past anyway, but it's just grown and magnified more because you've got that digital world as well.
Yeah, it's almost like a kind of performative element to things. And I suppose that just reminds me to mention as well, obviously, that it's not just that the impact that fireworks might have on members of the public, animals, etc., but that fireworks obviously can have life-changing impacts on individuals who use them improperly, with serious injuries as well. So
yeah, and I think so that's why it's been fantastic. You know, we've had Ben okay, but sort of fronting the schools campaign. Him and his mum Amy actually were judging the final entries of the schools comp this week, which is great, and it's been brilliant because they've been supporting that sort of journey all the way, and that must be quite hard for them as well, because obviously that was a very negative experience. He's still dealing with it now, with various medical appointments and so on, and is a real sort of true ambassador, and is trying to do his part in sort of educating others, so many years on from when that incident happened, which is amazing. And I think, yeah, we've spoken about, you know, NHS, they're under pressure as it is, having this influx of those types of injuries. Again, you're adding to a system which is already under huge strain and pressure. And it's something that could be avoided if people just stop and think for a minute and think about what they're doing. And yeah, just acting responsibly. I mean, we've put the messaging out again this year, you know, attend an organised display. You know, don't take your dog with you, which some people seem to think is a good idea to do that, and then wonder why they have to leave early or the dogs run off. But yeah, go to those organised displays where it's safe, where there's people on standby. If an incident does happen, it can be treated quickly, and that's certainly something we would always encourage.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say as well just about sort of the organised displays thing. It's something you kind of, well, I reflect on. I remember at the Millennium, we attended a kind of a house party where they had a fireworks display in the back garden, and I think we were standing at the side of the house, and 4 or 5 fireworks fell over and pointed at us and started going off. One of which hit me on the hand. No, it was a loud bang and left a kind of black mark, but it didn't burn or anything. But it was from that point on, I always kind of felt, yeah, it seems like just go to an organised display. Why risk these? Because if you're not trained in how to use fireworks properly, or how to, like, making sure that you bury them sufficiently, that you have them pointing in the right direction, etc., then it's probably a risk to your family, your friends, yourself, that you don't need to be taking to have private displays.
And I think we're all in, I mean, the population obviously is growing all the time, and there's more and more of housing estates and so on. It's a much more built up area than it was. And so you are going to have naturally a lot of people around. Gardens are back to back, you know, the streets are smaller, and with fireworks, there's lots of people out, there is excitement, so that there's more risk on that. So no, I think, and again, obviously it's been speaking about sort of the licensing side, and again doing certain checks around that, like if you want to go down that route, but again, whatever that education piece is, it can't be a tick box exercise of saying, yeah, I've read this, etc., etc. You know, it needs to be a behaviour change, and how do you get that across in a quick and an efficient way? So there definitely needs to be work put into that to make sure that whatever system you put in place, it is actually going to make somebody think, question why they want to go and do that, and make sure they do it in a safe way, and keeps all of them safe. And I think accidents that have happened over the year, they have been accidents, and it's been one tiny thing that someone's maybe forgotten to do or not read something on the packaging, but as a result, somebody's got hurt.
And I think as well that some of these fireworks certainly can, or they were. I do remember them being, and I'm sure maybe still now, I've not been at a private display of any kind or whatever, but some of these can be quite powerful fireworks and carry quite a punch that it's definitely not something that you would normally think to mess with if you weren't trained to mess with it.
No, and I think that again came through the survey we did with young people. They're like, they would choose the bigger, more brightly coloured packaged firework because they're expecting the big impact at the end. Now, does that necessarily mean that the bigger one's going to be more powerful? But that's their perception. If it's bright and it's colourful and it's going to be like comes in a big box, that's definitely the one that I want our family to have because it's going to hopefully create that big effect. But there's dangers around that, obviously, and again, people's knowledge of how to interpret the kind of packaging, the fireworks packaging. Do you know when you pick up a fireworks box, do you know where to look for that information? And all the safety features, or are you just quickly going to get out of the box and set up and think you know what you're doing? So there's that side of things as well.
Just briefly, on the changes to the law, do you think that the changes that were made in Scotland go far enough? Obviously, Scotland is sort of limited on changes we can make. Some of the control is reserved to Westminster, but do you think that these go far enough in terms of addressing safety concerns for you anyway?
Yeah, I think, we've been asked before, why is Scottish SPCA not calling for an outright ban on fireworks? There is always, we've seen it with the poppy trade is another thing that we deal with. When you keep banning things, there's all the unintended consequences. And what I think we need to see at the moment is there's been quite a lot of changes that are coming through as a result of this legislation. I would like to see, particularly this year and next, how that's enforced and the impact of that, of what's already put through. And then is that going to be enough? As I say, for me and for the Scottish SPCA, that firework control zone was a big sort of milestone, I would say, for us. If we can make sure that we can apply for those in the right way and work closely, obviously, with local authorities, it'd be good to see the impact of that. So I think we need to get everything rolled out that was laid down in the new legislation, get the right enforcement in place, because legislation is only as good as if you've got bodies on the ground to actually enforce it, and look at the impact. I'll be looking at obviously the calls that we get this year. Normally the types of calls that we get to Animal Helpline, we do see a peak over that bonfire night period. Some of it is dogs have gone out on the road and caused an RTA because doors have not been shut, or someone has thought, I'll just go and walk. You have people think, I'll just go and walk the dog outside so it gets used to the fireworks going off. Not the greatest way to kind of overcome your dog from that. So we have calls out. We have people who are maybe just quite upset about the behaviours that animals are displaying. The animals may be quite unsettled. We do have calls relating to wildlife. So sometimes we've had maybe like a horse, deer that have run through fencing and got themselves trapped. Things like that, and what you discover is, there are fireworks nearby, and it's obviously tried to run to get away from it and just misjudged that there's a fence there. So it'd be interesting to see with the changes coming up. Wildlife is one thing. There's only so much you can do with wildlife at the moment. We can just obviously go and respond. If there's a known area where there's quite a lot of species there, you can obviously do a bit of community advice and so on. Like, there's a big population of deer in this woodland. There's badgers here, etc. Think about, at least badgers can go underground, but animals like deer, they will look for cover. So again, we've got a role to play in that public messaging as well. Put all the advice out when it comes to your pets and so on. But I think it'd be really good to both ourselves, whether it's Scottish Fire and Rescue, police and so on, to again do that comparison, and the NHS as well, based on what's come in this year. Again, do the same exercise next year and see if it is going far enough. As you say, there's only so much we can do that's in sort of Scottish Parliament's control at the moment. So I think we've made great strides forward in trying to address this. And yes, have the legislative sort of framework side of things, but have that education sort of changing behaviour piece that runs alongside that as well. So you're trying to change the cultural side as to how we view and use fireworks.
Yeah, and you mentioned some of it there, but just can you just finally, what does a kind of typical fireworks season, bonfire night look like for you guys at SSPCA?
Yeah, so we will get calls coming in. Some of it will just be us giving advice, and it might be, okay, that clearly sounds like your animal is very distressed. Can you call your out of hours vet? you know, they might be able to prescribe something just to help that animal get through the next few hours. Or it might be that we're out because we're going up to rescue a dog that has been hit by a car, or wildlife, swans, deer, etc. And that's very much us just needing to get out and get there as quickly as possible. Like any service, we prioritise jobs. We do have loads of animal rescue officers and inspectors on the road every day of the year, and it's very much they'll prioritise. You might have somebody who needs to go and get to a dog. There's also a deer not that far away, and again, it's just making sure that we get there as quickly as possible. And then the other part of that is obviously then once you've got the animal, getting the treatment required, and getting it to either our National Wildlife Rescue Centre or into one of our animal rescue and rehoming centres if we can't find an owner for the animal at that time. Dogs in particular, they will run off if people are going in and outdoors, trick-or-treating or whatever it is, not trick-or-treating, but just kind of going out, having fun and seeing each other's houses. You know, dogs have that opportunity to escape. So, and that's, you will get calls, obviously, if a dog's maybe got lost. Now, that would be up to sort of dog wardens and so on as well to try and help find that dog. But if it's injured, that would certainly come to us. Hopefully the animal's microchipped, because then that makes it a lot easier for us to hopefully track down who the animal belongs to, and same for cats and so on as well. So yes, it can be busy, and sometimes it's not as busy, but certainly we do see a peak around that time, and 9 times out of 10 a lot of it's people just looking for some advice because they're seeing something, either their own animal or maybe a neighbour's animal that they're worried about, and we will go out and check. So
yeah, and I hadn't even thought that maybe Halloween coming just before it might get a wee bit more busy as well, but just to throw that in the mix. Well, thanks very much, Gilly, for coming along today and chatting with us and telling us a bit more about the campaign, just for the benefit of our listeners. So, yeah, fingers crossed that the changes make a difference this year, and hopefully plans to keep running the campaign into the next
I think
few years.
we will. Yeah, I think we'll just keep it going. We'll obviously update messaging as different parts of legislation comes in, but I think that's a really important part. I'd much prefer people to be, oh God, not that campaign again. Yeah, I know the messaging. If we get to that stage, that's great because they know the messaging. So, but you have different cohorts of people going through the education system and so on, and I think it's just so important. As I say, having that uniformed message, doesn't matter what the logo is that you're standing behind. If we're all saying the same thing and really promoting that message, that can help develop that sort of behaviour change that you're looking for, and keep every person and every animal safe.
Great.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.